The 2023 Texas Longhorns roster may be well on their way to putting 10 players in the National Football League, but could the 2024 roster be even more talented?
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we are comparing the 2023 roster to the 2024 roster, for the Texas Longhorns football team, position group by position group. Which roster would have the advantage at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, etc., offensively and defensively. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I got this content idea, what I was going to talk about on today's episode, from an article that I believe Joseph Cook wrote January 30th, the other day. So just a few days ago on Inside Texas. And they just did the offense. But, like I said, they compared the 2023 roster and the 2024 roster position group by position group, right? And we're going to take it a step further and do offense and defense on today's episode. But I thought it was a really cool concept, right? When we look at the 2023 roster, like I said, they're, well on their way 2 months from now to putting 10 players in the National Football League, whether that be via the draft or undrafted free agency. And a lot of people think the 2024 roster could be even more talented than that, right? What we do know is the 2023 and 2024 teams are two of the most talented teams we've seen at the 40 acres probably ever, and certainly since the Mack Brown era, right? And we're seeing the fruits of Steve Sarkisian's labor when it comes to recruiting, right? And that's why, when you look at these rosters and moving forward, Texas should be a perennial national championship contender every year. The way that Steve Sarkisian has been recruiting with the talent on these rosters and the product that we're seeing on the field with the Longhorns finally starting to play Texas Longhorns football in 2023. So we're going to start with the quarterback position all the way offensively and defensively until we get to safety, right? So in 2023, your top three quarterbacks were Quinn Ewers, Malik Murphy, and Arch Manning. In 2024, it'll be Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, and Trey Owens. And I'm going with the 2024 room, and I really don't think it's close, right? Quinn Ewers, you would expect him to be at least 1% better in 2024 than he was in 2023. So you would give him the edge there. But I think, under another offseason under Steve Sarkisian, I think Quinn Ewers can take another big jump the same way he did from 2022 to 2023. He was really good in 2023, but I think he'll be exceptional in 2024. And he has a clear path to win the Heisman, right? And if you have a Heisman winner in your 2024 room, that kind of ends the debate right there, right? I think if, this Texas football team can win 10 games, I think, Texas should have one of, if not the most explosive offense in the country. And Quinn Ewers is already, slated as the favorite right now. I think him and Carson Beck are both tied on most sports books at like plus 750 odds to win the Heisman next season. So right now he's your leading Heisman candidate, or at least a favorite going into next season. And there's no Heisman candidate going into the season with like huge momentum behind his name, like Caleb Williams coming into last year, right? So I think if he could stay healthy, Quinn Ewers, and Texas has one of the best offenses in the country and they win at least 10 games, then he'll definitely be one of the leading candidates for the Heisman. I think 2 games will determine who wins that trophy next year. Texas will absolutely be involved in one of them and could possibly, or maybe should, be involved in 2. I think the first game is Georgia at Texas on October 19th. And I think the second game is the SEC championship, right? I think the Heisman, if Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers stays healthy, comes down to who will be the better team in the regular season, right? Texas has every opportunity to beat Georgia in the regular season and then possibly knock them off again in the SEC championship, which I think would lock up the Heisman for Quinn Ewers in 2024, once again, if he stays healthy for the entire season. I'm taking Arch Manning right now over Malik Murphy, right? I think Arch Manning is just a little bit more polished than Malik. Malik obviously was really good for us, came in and won 2 games for us, 2 crucial games, but he was a little shaky in terms of individual performance and did turn the ball over 3 times in those 2 games and possibly could have been a couple more, right? So I think Arch Manning right now is a little bit more polished than Malik Murphy. And, I think with another 7 months under his belt, right, in Steve Sarkisian's offense, I think he'll be one of the best backups in the country and probably could start for damn near every team in the country. And Trey Owens is, I think, really underrated coming out of high school, really polished, and I definitely trust Steve Sarkisian's evals when it comes to quarterbacks. So, I don't anticipate him needing to take a snap next year unless things are going really, really bad or we're just beating the crap out of somebody. But Trey Owens should be, one of the most talented third string quarterbacks in the country. I'm going with the 2024 room. Running back 2023, your top two were Jonathan Brooks and Cedric Baxter. 2024, your top two are projected to be Cedric Baxter and Jaden Blue. And when you look at it, I'm going with the 2023 room, right? When we saw Jonathan Brooks in 2021 and 2022, I think we knew, right, even in a reserve role, that he was that guy, right? He just happened to be behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. And when we saw, Jonathan Brooks for 8 games as a starter, it was special, right? I think that, he arguably was playing like the best offensive player in the country, non-quarterback, right? Maybe just best offensive player, period. I think the only other 2 players you can make an argument for are maybe Rome Odunze from Washington and Malik Neighbors from LSU. But even then, right, Jonathan Brooks was performing as a top 3 offensive player in the country when he was healthy. Dark horse Heisman candidate and the runaway favorite to win the Doak Walker when he tore his ACL, right? And I'm just not sure that I see that from Cedric Baxter right now. Like, I can say Cedric Baxter will have a 2023 Jonathan Brooks-like performance, right? So that's why I would give 2023 the edge, right? And I think Jaden Blue in a reserve role will be better than Cedric Baxter was in a reserve role last year. Now, he was a true freshman, still learning the offense, still, getting accustomed to moving out of state, being in a completely new environment, all of that. He was also nicked up, so we probably didn't see the full output that we would expect from a talented 5-star running back like Cedric Baxter. And I think he'll have a breakout season this year, right? But if you ask me right now, who is a better running back between Cedric Baxter and Jaden Blue, even though Cedric Baxter is a better fit for this offense, unquestionably, I'm not sure that Jaden Blue is not a better running back than Cedric Baxter right now. But I do know that Jonathan Brooks was better than both of them. And that's why I give the edge to the 2023 room, even though in 2024, we still should have one of the best rooms in the country. Tight end, you had 2023 Jatavian Sanders and Gunnar Helm as your top 2 tight ends. This season, you get the transfer Amari Niblack from Alabama, and then Gunnar Helm returns as one of your top 2 tight ends going into 2024. And I'm going to give the 2023 room the edge on this one as well. I think Jatavian Sanders is just different. Joseph Cook made the argument that Amari Niblack may be the best replacement in the country for Jatavian Sanders, and I certainly agree, right? So bringing a player, that explosive, averaging 16 yards of reception at the tight end position is really good for Steve Sarkisian's offense. And he's repeatedly said that, tight end is the second most important position in his offense. So they did a good job of bringing in Amari Niblack. And I think Gunnar Helm will take that next step next year. And he's really exciting as a player. It's going to be exciting to see him in a bigger role, right? Because I think he can really produce for this Texas football team. But this is just me giving all the credit in the world to Jatavian Sanders, right? What he was able to produce on the field, I still think we kind of underutilized him just based on his talent level, right? I think we could have used him week in and week out the same way that Brock Bowers was utilized. But I just think what he brings to the table in terms of his athleticism, strong hands at the catch point, ability to make plays after the catch, the way he developed and came on as a blocker, the way that he was talked about as a leader in the locker room. I just think Jatavian Sanders is a different type of specimen at that tight end position, right? And one of those players you look at it and say, he's a mismatch problem for anybody he goes up against, right? Like I said, I think Amari Niblack can definitely grow into that role. I think Gunnar Helm is underrated as a player. It could have a huge 2024 for this football team. But like I said, I just think Jatavian Sanders is different, right? And it's going to be hard for me to say Amari Niblack or Gunnar Helm can reach, the potential or the potential of the potential Jatavian Sanders had at the 40 acres. So I'm going with the 2023 room, but very excited to see the combination of Amari Niblack and Gunnar Helm next season. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into the wide receiver room, offensive line, and then move to the defensive side of the ball. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel, and the Super Bowl is around the corner. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a dub or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Ooh. Okay, so going with the wide receiver position, to me, this depends on how they're utilized, right? When you look at the top three, you had Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and Jordan Whittington. And then when you look at 2024, you have Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, and Jonte Cook, right? If we're still going to only utilize three wide receivers in Steve Sarkisian's offense and not do much more outside of that, then I'm going with the 2023 group, right? I think Xavier Worthy, crazy speed, crazy explosiveness, a threat to hit his head on the goalpost anytime he touches the ball. Very, underrated route runner, really good with his feet, really good at getting in and out of his cuts and his breaks. So Xavier Worthy is all world. Adonai Mitchell, I think, is the most complete receiver we've seen at the 40 acres in a long time. And I think he's going to excel in the National Football League and in the biggest moments when you needed catches, right? College football playoff games, the big catch to seal the TCU game, the big catch to seal the Alabama game, right? Like those 50-50 balls were 80-20 for Adonai Mitchell, and Jordan Whittington was underutilized and underrated his entire time at the 40 acres, right? I think Isaiah Bond could be, the Xavier Worthy replacement, but it'll be hard to be as explosive as Xavier Worthy. I just think he might be in a better offense at 2024 than we had in 2023. Matthew Golden is a really explosive player, but it'll be hard for me to say right now he's better than Adonai Mitchell. And Jonte Cook, has 8 catches in his career, right? And so, as talented as he is, he remains to be seen, right? And I don't know if we can put him over Jordan Whittington at this point, even though he seems to be more talented, right? Jordan Whittington gave us years of production at the 40 acres. Where I would give the 2024 room the edge is if you see Silas Bolden have a big role, if you see 5-star receiver Ryan Wingo getting really involved in the offense. At that point, if we're using 4 to 5 receivers, then I think definitely the 2024 room has the advantage. But if we're just going top 3 receivers versus top 3 receivers, and that's all we're going to utilize, then I think the 2023 room was really special in terms of what we had at that position in terms of Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and Jordan Whittington. On the offensive line, you're returning 4 or 5 starters. 2023, you had Kelvin Banks, Hayden Conner, Jake Majors, Devin Campbell, and Christian Jones. Going to 2024, the only switch will be replacing Christian Jones with either Cam Williams or Brandon Baker, more than likely Cam Williams in his true junior season. And I think 2024 has the advantage, right? You would expect the 4 starters to be better next year. Kelvin Banks is going into his contract year, and he's been nothing short of special his first 2 years at the 40 acres. I think Hayden Conner really came on last year, especially at the end of the season. And when he's not committing penalties, he's really good, right? Jake Major is one of the most rated offensive lineman in the country. I think he definitely takes another step next season. And I think DJ Campbell, right after his first year of being a full-time starter, we saw the talent, we saw the flashes. There were times in pass protection where he wasn't great. There was times where, he was still having those procedural penalties. But I think definitely in what could be a contract year for him, I think we'll see him really start to put it all together this year, and he'll be one of the best right guards in the country. And I think you certainly can't go wrong with Cam Williams or Brandon Baker at right tackle, whoever wins that position in camp. So I think the 2024 roster with all the talent and experience on it on the offensive line, and then you still have depth pieces like Peyton Kirkland, Cole Hudson, Brandon Baker, if he doesn't start as a true freshman 5-star, Connor Robinson. This offensive line is just loaded. I think you have to give the 2024 group the edge on that one over 2023, especially since you're returning 4 or 5 starters who you expect to be better in the 2024 season. Moving over to the defensive side, we're going with defensive tackle, and we'll just get this out the way, right? Obviously, it's 2023. When you look at Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, what they were able to do last year, you're talking about 2 players who likely are going to be drafted in the top 100 picks. Byron Murphy might even be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. You just can't compare that to what you're looking at your projected starters in as Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton right now, right? You're talking about 2 All-Americans. Like I said, 2 top 100 picks in the NFL draft. I would put good money on that, right? You're talking about the defensive player of the year in the Big 12 conference and the defensive lineman of the year in the Big 12 conference. And not only that, they scored touchdowns on the offensive side of the ball too, right? They played fullback as well, right? So they showed positional versatility. They showed side of the ball versatility, right? And every time you watch Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, especially when they were on the field at the same time, they literally jumped off your screen, right? Like I said, I tell people all the time, I don't even watch trench play. Like I watch the quarterback when I'm watching the game and I watch the skill positions, right? But I couldn't help but seeing Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy making crazy plays every time Texas took the field. So it's not even fair to compare them to Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton. And, hopefully, they both have the best years of their career, and the defensive tackle room is a strength for the Texas Longhorns, especially with new defensive line coach Kenny Baker. But like I said, as of this moment, there is no comparison between Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, and Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton going into next season. Huge losses, literally huge for the Texas Longhorns. At edge rusher, I do think you have the advantage going into 2024 compared to what you had in 2023, mainly because you're bringing back your 2023 starters for 2024 while adding upgrades at that position. When you look at it, Barron Sorrell and Ethan Burke were your two starters last season with Justice Finkley in heavy rotation, right? All three of those players are coming back in 2024. But I don't think edge was a huge strength for you, right? I think Barron Sorrell is a solid player. I think Ethan Burke was a solid player, but I think when it mattered most, right, or in your biggest games, especially against Oklahoma and Washington, you just weren't able to get the pass rush that you need to win games at the highest level, right? And sometimes, you don't want to always have to blitz to get pressure. You don't always want to have to run a stunt, or a game up front to get pressure, right? You don't always want to have to scheme up pressure. Sometimes you just want your guy to be better than their guy, right? And it's been a long time at the 40 acres since we've had guys like that, right? Where we can just say on the edge position, go get it, right? Like you're one of the best players in the country, one-on-one, win your block, go get the quarterback, go blow up this play. And I think you've added two players in that ilk to this roster, to the edge position this season, right? And Trey Moore and Colin Simmons. We know Trey Moore was one of the best edge rushers in the portal. Texas did a really good job of prioritizing him and going and getting him, making sure he didn't go to Alabama. 22 sacks over the last 2 seasons at UTSA, and hopefully he can bring that same type of production, taking a step up in competition. And you brought in Colin Simmons, right? A 5-star edge rusher, one of the best defensive players in the country over the last 4 years in high school, a 2-time state champion at Duncanville, who brings that type of juice to the edge rush position, and somebody you could look at in the future and say, he's one of the best edge rushers in the country, right? He's the type of player who could be dominant on this level, dominant in the NFL, but once again, the type of player that, one-on-one, when the game matters most, when you need a stop, when you need to get your offense back on the field, when you need to get their offense off the field, you can say Colin Simmons, go get him. Trey Moore, go get him, right? But then you still have Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, Justice Finkley as depth. You still can bring on players who didn't play a lot for you last year, like Colton Vasek and Tassili Akana as depth. So they've done a really good job of fortifying the defensive line, especially at the edge position. And now I think that room could be really useful for you this year, and has a ton of talented players in terms of depth at that position that could come in and give you a fresh pass rush down after down, snap after snap. A quick word from our sponsors, and we finish up with linebacker, corner, and safety. Who has the advantage between the 2023 and 2024 rosters? All right, going with linebacker, and this one was tough. Like when I was writing it out, I was like, this probably is going to be the toughest one. 2023, you had Jalen Ford, Anthony Hill, and David Benda. 2024, it looks like your projected top 3 will be Anthony Hill, David Benda, and Leona LaFau. And I'm just going to start with Anthony Hill because I think he's all world, right? And I think in a bigger role, even though he kind of forced him, to make him somewhat of a starter last year. But, I think even in a bigger role as more of your primary linebacker, I think he's one of the best defensive players in the country, right? And I think he's a threat to win SEC Defensive Player of the Year next season, right? Defensive Player of the Year in the conference. He's that good. I think he's going to be a force when he gets to the National Football League, but I think we're blessed, right, to have a player like Anthony Hill. And I thank the Lord almost every day, right, or frequently enough, right, that Texas A&M went on that downward spiral, right? We were able to get Anthony Hill to decommit from A&M and commit to Texas in the 2022 season. So I think Anthony Hill will be a lot better next year than he was last year, right? I think David Benda will be a lot better next year than he was last year. And I think that's huge for this room and this group, the defense as a whole, to have a veteran leader, veteran experience at this linebacker position with Anthony Hill and Leona LaFau but both being really young, and somebody who's a really athletic player who's really good at playing downhill, right? He made a lot of really big plays for Texas last year, especially in that Alabama game, right? He was really good in that game for sure, and then down the stretch. But I just think losing Jalen Ford is huge, right? Jalen Ford should have been Defensive Player of the Year in the conference in 2022. I think he took a step back in 2023, but a lot of reports are saying he was dealing with the injury, and he just did look like the same player down the stretch. He still had a really good season in 2023, but I don't think he matched his 2022 production, which would have been hard, period. But, like I said, a lot of people are saying he was dealing with the injury, and that makes sense for sure. And so, it's hard for me to say the room is getting better or will be better next year without a player like Jalen Ford. I am high on Leonga Lafau. Like I said, I think Anthony Hill and David Benda take that next step. But like I said, it's just hard for me to say, right, that the room will be better without Jalen Ford. So right now, I'm going to give the edge to the 2023 room, but I'm definitely hoping 2024 can prove me wrong. I think Leonga Lafau is certainly talented enough to prove me wrong. But right now, I'm just a little bit hesitant to say this room is going to get better with the loss of somebody like Jalen Ford, who's meant so much to this defense and this Texas football team over the last 2 years as our leader and our quarterback on that side of the ball. At the corner position, 2023, Ryan Watts, Terrence Brooks, Malik Muhammad, and Jahdae Barron were really your four corners that got the majority of the reps. In 2024, it'll be Terrence Brooks, Malik Muhammad, and Jahdae Barron. Not sure who really will be in that fourth role or like the first guy off the bench. It could be Austin Jordan, Gavin Holmes, Jalen Gilbo. It could be Kobe Black, that remains to be seen. I think the 2024 room will be better just because you're returning so many of your players, right? Malik Muhammad was a true freshman. You would expect him to be even better next season, and he was really good in his true freshman season. I think Terrence Brooks was really good. I think in, some of the biggest games like Oklahoma and Washington, he maybe got taken advantage of, but you don't get to the college football playoffs, win 12 games and be one of the, four best teams in the country if your starting corners are not good, right? So Terrence Brooks was really good, and hopefully he can take that next step next season. And I think Jahdae Barron, especially down the stretch, wasn't the player we're used to seeing, but just like Jalen Ford, I think he was dealing with some injuries in the latter part of the season. I think he almost sat out the U of H game, but had to come in at the end to make sure we got that victory. So I think coming into 2024, if he's fully healthy, he's going to be wearing Michael Huff's number. So, hopefully some of that rubs off on him. But I think Jahdae Barron will have a really good season. And I think they've done such a good job of recruiting at that position that the depth behind them is really exciting as well, especially some of the younger players like Kobe Black, Wardell Mack, and Santana Wilson. So I think even though you're losing a really good player who maybe was underappreciated on the 40 acres in Ryan Watts and just dealt with a lot of injuries last year, I still think the 2024 room looks like they'll be better going into next season. And when you look at safety, I don't think it's close, right? That's no disrespect to Jaron Thompson and Michael Taft, who played the majority of the snaps last year. Obviously, it didn't work out with Jalen Catalon, right? You were getting a player who was formerly all SEC at the safety position, and he really just wasn't healthy towards the end. And even when he was healthy, he didn't get any snaps because they put him in for a bunch of snaps in the Texas Tech game. So he was healthy at the end of the season, but just didn't play a lot for us. And, now we'll see what happens at UNLV. Jaron Thompson is now off to Auburn. I think the biggest reason for that is he knew that they were bringing in reinforcements at the safety position, and his starting spot was likely gone. And, I think Michael Taft, Keaton Crawford, and Derek Williams were able to make plays for you last season. But I think now what you have at the safety position is an upgrade, right? You bring back Michael Taft, and, I think he'll take that next step. He'll be even better. Derek Williams was a true freshman last season, so you would expect just naturally with experience and development, he'll be better, but in a bigger role, knowing he's a starter. I think that he'll provide a lot of value on the back half of that defense. And bringing in Andrew Makuba, right? Arguably, well, I guess Caleb Downs is now the best safety in the country, out of the portal. But Andrew Makuba arguably was the second best safety, right? A 3-year starter at Clemson and a defense that was never outside of the top 25 in terms of scoring defense while he was a starter at Clemson. So that's a huge upgrade at the safety position. It was one of our biggest weaknesses last year. And like I said, making Derek Williams the full-time starter, another year of development for Michael Taft, and then bringing over Andrew Makuba should make the 2024 room at the safety position a lot better than we were in 2023, where that room was somewhat of a liability. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.